Today is December the 5th, 2018. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University, and I'm in Reno, Oklahoma today to speak with Duane Crider. And this is part of our Oklahoma Conservation Heritage Oral History Project, which is a collaboration between OSU and the Natural Resources Conservation Services and then the newly formed Oklahoma Conservation Historical Society. So thank you for coming today.
You're welcome.
Let's begin with, well, I guess I should back up and say you have been with conservations from 1972 through 2010.
That's right.
So we're going to talk about all of that today.
All right, great.
Beginning with when, where were you born?
I was born in Enid, Oklahoma in 1949, February the 8th, 1949, and grew up in Lamont, Oklahoma, which is in Grant County.
Okay.
And on a farm about 6.5 miles west of Lamont. Wheat, alfalfa, those are the things and my brother and I got into FFA, and so we had hogs that we raised and showed, and we had cattle, and hauled a lot of hay. I helped a friend of mine that was about 4 years older than I was, and I wasn't big. And we hauled a lot of hay together.
Square bales back in those days,
Yes,
I guess.
yes. And
So there were two of you?
well, there was actually three, and the other person varied depending on who was available at the time. But we hauled a lot of hay, and I wasn't very big. I probably didn't weigh more than 120, and we weighed a bale one time, and it weighed 120.
Wow.
Now that was unusual. They usually were about 70, 65, 70, which built up the muscles.
So your father was a farmer,
Father was a farmer.
and was your mother stay home or?
Pretty much. Now she did work at the bank in Lamont,
Okay.
and for a while in Enid at the bank. And the farm I grew up on was my great-grandfather, Kirby, and he and his brothers and dad were in the land run.
Oh.
And Cherokee Strip, and so that's where and he lived in this house where I grew up, but when he got up in years, he decided to move into Lamont, so we moved out on the farm.
Is it a centennial farm now? Is it still in the family? Somewhat?
Well, it's still in the family. It ought to be.
It ought to be.
It ought to be.
Yeah.
And I've never been contacted about that. But
You have to contact them.
oh, you do? I may do that.
Okay.
It's
Well, where had they come from, your grandparents,
well,
the Kirbys?
he was from Virginia.
Okay.
His dad, not my great-granddad's dad, and he moved to Kansas after the Civil War. He was in the Civil War, and after the Civil War, he moved to Kansas, and then they got in the land run, and there was several brothers and the dad, so they got quite a few quarters, and then they bought a lot since. So, and I decided, I went to OSU
Not there yet.
thinking I would be a farmer, but I decided that it wasn't for me.
So is it just your brother and you, children?
And my sister,
And the sister.
three of us. I was the oldest. My brother was 18 months younger than I was, and my sister was 18 months younger than he.
Well, they played
So-
that pretty good, didn't
Yeah,
they?
yeah.
Well, describe the house you grew up in.
Well, it was 2-bedroom, and so we turned one of the study, I guess you would call it, the library, into a bedroom. So we made it into a 3-bedroom, and then a living room and kitchen and a utility room, and it was built probably in the 20s.
Okay.
So it's gone now. Somebody bought 15 acres from us and pushed it down.
Did it have indoor plumbing or?
Yeah,
Had headed
yeah,
to a
it did.
permit by that time?
Had a cellar, went in that a few times when there were storms coming, and in a milk house, they called it, and which was 2-story also, that was about, probably 60 feet from the house, and had a garage. And so then there was the barn where we raised our hogs and cattle, and then a round top barn. And the round top's still there. It's about the only thing still on the farm.
And a water windmill?
Water windmill, yes, exactly. Kept the water, a good-sized concrete tank that the cattle depended on, and we watered the hogs, my brother and I, out of that same area.
Did you have to milk?
We had a milk cow before I went to grade school, and she died. We think she ate something metal, and she died. So a little piece of barbed wire or whatever. And I milked her a couple of times. I was probably 5 when she died, but I remember.
Had that experience then?
Yes. It was flat land, so we had 2 quarters there, and then we had some more land where my mother's mother and dad had the land. It was probably 10 miles from where we lived, and we had cattle there and farmland. It was a little more rolling, so we had some terraces there.
Okay, some conservation efforts there.
Yes, yes.
Do you remember your first tractor, driving your first tractor?
Oh my goodness, yes. My dad trusted me way more. I don't know how old I was, pretty young. And we had a trailer on behind the tractor, and we were picking up hay, and he would run between the tractor and the trailer, just and jump back and forth picking up hay bales. And one time something happened, and he said, "Stop." And I'm going, "Oh my goodness, which lever did I pull back?" And I finally did, and I'm going, "Oh my goodness." It was a little scary for me. But I was pretty young, and I drove tractor a lot when I was a teenager.
Did you get paid for it, or just if you
No,
needed something, you got your parents got it?
Yes, exactly.
An exchange, more or less.
You're right. And I loved it. I'd be all day in a full bright sun with no shirt on, no shade, no cap, it's a wonder I survived. But I had a good tan.
Did you wear a hat at least?
I didn't wear a hat.
No hat either.
I had blonde hair because of the bleach out from the sun.
And no sunscreen.
No.
Oh, well.
Now, one interesting thing I've got to throw out is when there was a school, a 1-room country school about 2 miles from our house. It went through the 8th grade, and there were 8 kids in this school, and 3 of us were in the 1st grade, and 2 were in the 2nd grade. So this school was actually growing, because there wasn't hardly, then the others were scattered around different grades. And so I went to a 1-room schoolhouse in the 1st grade, and then they closed it.
What was the name?
Rich Valley School. Outhouses for the bathrooms.
Well, what would you do for lunch?
We took our own. We took lunch. Now, like Thanksgiving, our mothers would cook and bring, and we'd have big Thanksgiving dinner and Christmas, but there was no cooking facilities there. So.
And it heated with a
Well,
stove in
you
the
know
corner?
what?
I don't know.
I don't remember. I don't remember it was comfortable.
Well, how would you get there?
Well, it was only 2 miles, so my mom or dad would take me.
Would take you. You didn't have to walk.
No, I didn't have to walk. And the only teacher was a man. And he'd get his daughter to come in and help out once in a while. So they closed it, and then I went into Lamont, and huge class at Lamont, about 20. And so we had 11-man football, played basketball, and when I was a senior, they could see the handwriting on the wall that this 11-man wasn't so we started having 6-man games. It's a whole different game, and you've got to be in a lot better shape than we were. So, but it was fun. It was fun.
We had muscles from working the hay.
Well, that's right. That's right.
What was your favorite subject in high school?
Math and science. Yeah. I wasn't very good at English. I met my wife at OSU, and she started teaching me English immediately because I didn't have very good grammar. And so she's been teaching me for quite a while. And she became an English teacher later.
So in high school, what were your plans when you got out?
Well, I thought I wanted to come back and farm. But I could see my dad was struggling just to keep his thing going. And so when I was at OSU, I majored in agronomy. And I thought I wanted to be a golf course superintendent. So I switched to turf management. Well, I went to work for a golf course there in Stillwater, and then after they had a deal with another golf course that I went and worked a whole summer, and I thought, I just thought, no, I didn't. And I even interviewed for some jobs, and I just decided that isn't what I wanted to do. And I knew a lot of guys that had been student trainees in the Soil Conservation Service at that time. And so I got to thinking, why not? Why not give it a try? So I applied in August of 72. And like 2 weeks later, I'm getting a list of towns to choose from to go to. So we'd been going to Tahlequah and floating the river, which was totally different country than I grew up in. And I said, I want to put Tahlequah. You got a list, and you could pick 1, 2, 3. So I picked Tahlequah's first, and I thought, shoot, everybody did that. I won't get it. Guess what? I got it. So I went to Tahlequah. Well, let me back up to tell you when I met my wife.
Well, let's wait to get a timeline. When did you graduate from high school? What year?
67.
67, and you went to OSU at that point.
Yes.
Where did you stay on campus? Where'd you room?
Well, the first place I stayed was West Bennett dorm.
Okay.
Met a lot of guys that I still do things with. There were actually 4 of us. Here's a class of 20, and 4 of us went to OSU.
Wow.
4 boys. And 3 of us lived in that same dorm. We were all pretty tight friends, and in fact, one of them was my roommate. So
were y'all 4 first generation to go? Do you think? First in your families to go?
I think we were. I don't know of any, especially OSU. Now, some of them could have gone to college. Some of the dads, but I don't think so.
Did your dad go somewhere?
No.
So you're the first in your family?
Yes.
Okay, go
Yes.
then. Okay.
So the second year, there was a new dorm with girls on one side, guys on the other, called 12-story. This thing's been torn down. And
Never heard.
West Bennett, and yeah, I don't know, they probably gave it a name
Was
later.
it Kerr Drummond?
No,
Oh, no. 12-story. Okay, I'll have to do some work.
It's about the northwestern most dorm at that time.
Okay.
But anyway, we started hanging out with some girls. I mean, meeting some girls, and so about December, a girl that we had met from Tulsa introduced me to Jan Walker. And so we had our first date on Friday the 13th of December 1968. Friday the 13th.
50 years, you need to do something.
That's right. 50 years is coming up.
Yeah.
So, and we got married the next fall on 9/11. Some important dates. And
So your junior year.
yes,
Your junior.
yeah. So then we lived in married student housing. We lived out northwest of town in the country, which wasn't very handy. We were probably 3 or 4 miles out of town. Then we moved into a small trailer house that you could walk to campus. And then we moved into a 1-bedroom house. And graduated in 72. Well, I was on the 5-year plan. And then got the job with the NRCS and went to Tahlequah. And Bill Dudley was a district conservationist.
Mm-hmm. Well, while you were in agronomy, did you have a favorite professor?
Oh, I probably did, but I can't remember. I can't remember all of them today. I hadn't thought about that.
Any
I
classes?
could.
Any classes you struggled with? I thought you might not pass.
Oh, well, I didn't have time to do a lot of reading, so some classes like history where you have to do a lot of reading, I didn't do well. And it's not because I didn't like history, because I love it, but I just didn't spend the time I needed to. But yeah, chemistry was a little tough at OSU, but I did fine in it.
Spend any time in the library?
A little bit,
Oh.
not a lot, but I did. I did spend some time in the library.
Well, in that time that you were there, the Vietnam War was going on.
Yes.
Do you remember anything
Oh.
regarding that?
Well, my wife's brother went to Vietnam, and they had that drawing. They give you a number, just like February the 8th got a number. My brother, July 20th, got a number. And they were only about 5 apart. And so they started with the first one and made it to about 150. And if your number got drawn, you were drafted. Well, they got to within probably 15 of my number and had enough. So I didn't go to Vietnam and didn't ever go into any military service.
Well, was there any unrest on campus regarding all of that you recall?
Well, no.
Not really?
No, I don't remember anything like that. I know it was going on around the U.S., but I
Not
don't
in
remember.
Stillwater.
No, I don't remember anything in Stillwater. And I might have just missed it. I don't know.
Maybe not. The other thing that was happening during that time was 1969, I think, was the Moonwalk.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any memories of that?
Well, I do. Seen it, and I've seen it so many times since that,
Right.
yeah, that was a major thing.
Major deal. Okay, so you graduated. Do you remember your graduation day? Did your parents come?
Yes, I gotta remember. I hadn't thought about that either.
Was it in Gallagher? Was it in the arena or in the football stadium?
I think it was in the football stadium.
Outside.
I'm not swearing to that either. But it was, and I think they came.
And Jan graduated the same
Well,
semester.
when we got married, she quit school and started. She thought she wanted to be, and she had a lot of experience as a secretary. Her dad, by then, she started out on Louisiana, Baton Rouge. He worked for the Kansas City Southern Railroad as a sales, hauling business. And so they transferred him to Tulsa, and that's where she came. She went to Tulsa Edison High School, which was one of the top 10 high schools in America at that time. And then he got transferred on up to Kansas City. And so we'd had that experience of her life, and so we got married in Kansas City because they'd already moved up there. And I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, tell them about her career. I mean, she didn't.
Oh, yeah.
She didn't graduate.
Yeah.
She got that.
She quit school. She thought she wanted to be a secretary because she'd been a secretary up in Kansas City in his office. And so she quit and went to work for the extension service as a secretary on campus, and loved it. And so when she got, and then after I got out of college, the kids were born, so she took care of them till they were probably in junior high, and then she went, but we were here by then. She went out here to Redlands Community College, and then went to UCO and got her teaching degree. Her and a couple other girls that were under a similar situation. And so she was a high school English teacher here in El Reno, and then retired from that and went to work as an English teacher out at Redlands Community College. And then they came out with this rule that if a college is gonna, at any level, is gonna hire someone to be a teacher, that person has to have a master's degree with like 18 hours in that subject. Well, she didn't have a master's, and so she's now a tutor in the English department. And
Not retired.
well, not really. She doesn't work full time, but she loved it out there. And I think it was a kind of a goofy rule, at least initially. It'd probably work out, but here they lost some of their best teachers because of the rule.
But she could have grandfathered them in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you would think they would, but they didn't.
Okay, so you got on with SCS because some friends had.
Well, the
And
friends had been
Michael
student trainees, and Jan said, I worked for the landscaping department at OSU when I was going to school.
Okay.
And I graduated in the spring, and about midway through the summer, Jan says, Duane, you're going to have to get a different job because this landscaping is for students and you're no longer a student. So I'm going, you're right. So I went to the SES office, and Fred Fortney, you ever heard of Fred Fortney?
I heard the name.
And so I was hired within a month and went to Tahlequah. We lived in an apartment, and then stayed there for a year as a trainee. Bill Dudley was the district conservationist, and Gene Hart, the technician. And I learned a lot from both of them. I didn't know much about the Soil Conservation Service at that time, because we had flat land where I grew up. Now the other farm was already terraced, and so I didn't know much about what the Soil Conservation Service did. So I learned what it does in northeast Oklahoma, which is a little different than where I grew up, but loved being there. And you stayed in that position for a year, and then you got transferred. Well, I got transferred to Pawnee. So Jan was pregnant, And she had, when we were in Pawnee, she had our son in Stillwater on Christmas Day. Another big date. And so I stayed in Pawnee for 2 years.
Did you have a choice of going there, or did you just say that's where you're going?
That's pretty much.
They said you're going.
Yeah. So went there. Russell Llewellyn was a district conservationist, and Dean Cook was the technician, and loved being there too. Loved working with those guys, and then. You stayed in that position for a year. Well, I've been in that position for almost 2 years. And the job at Geary, Oklahoma, which is out west of here, came open, and I applied and got it. So, and Jan was pregnant again. So 2 years, 2 weeks, and 2 days after Greg, our son, was born, our daughter Jenna was born in OOHRP.
I think that would have been in January.
It was in January 10th.
What important dates around that now?
Well, the 2 years, 2 weeks, 2 days is
It's a number.
is the only thing I could.
And you chose to go there.
Yes.
That was your decision to go.
Well, yes, and it was during the oil boom, and there weren't any houses available. There were. So Jan was crying when we left Geary. We don't know where we're going to go. So we stopped in Calumet, which is just on this side of Geary, about 15 miles, and to get gas. And I'm just joking with this lady, and I says, it's a lot smaller town than Geary. And I said, there aren't any houses for sale here, are there? I'm just joking. She said, yes. Two fairly new houses. And I said, where are they? So out by the baseball field. So we drove out there. They were better than anything that we'd seen. And so we bought our house in Calumet. So I drove from Calumet to Geary every day that was in, 72, 73. That would have been late in 75. And Elsa Bullen was a district conservationist here. And Elsa you got to realize that the way you were the district conservationist, so you worked within, Geary is not a county seat, but it has a big chunk of Blaine County and about half of Canadian County. So I worked the west half of Canadian County. Elsa was here working the east half of Canadian County, the East Canadian County Conservation District. The one at Geary was called the Central North Canadian River Conservation District. And then at Hinton had part of the county, and it was called the North Caddo Conservation District. So I was dealing with 3 conservation districts later on when I came here. So it was a little unusual. And then, I don't know, in the 90s they put it on county boundaries.
Okay.
So, but it was kind of strange. But it was a good experience. Daryl Putman, who was a technician out at Geary, and I are still good friends. And Gene Hart lived in El Reno, and he was a technician along with Daryl out of Geary. So he would come through Calumet, and we would hook up together. He would drive. He'd pick me up one week, and then he'd drive to my house, and I'd drive the next week. So kind of carpool. So then in let's see, 80, Elsa retired, so I applied for El Reno and got it. So in 1980, we moved from Calumet to El Reno.
So that makes you in this position here for 30 years? 80
Yep.
to 90 to 90 to
Yep,
30 years.
exactly.
Is that unusual for someone to stay that long?
Well, you know what? I got to, this is unusual. I think it is unusual. The technician that was here, Hubert Choate, had been here when I moved here. He'd been here since 1950.
Well, I've stayed
And
here 30 years.
Yeah, and he worked a few more years before he retired. Elsa Bullen had been here since 1955. So he'd been, so there, in that, from 1950, now there was actually two technicians after Hubert retired. So in my time period, Hubert had started in 1950, and so there'd been three technicians here and 2 district conservationists since the 50s till 2010. That's pretty unusual, I think. I haven't.
People just liked it.
Oh yeah, I mean,
So
I
I'm
loved
thinking
it.
that's 4 moves, right? From Tahlequah to Pawnee to Geary to here.
That's right,
Yeah.
and that's it. I've never.
That's about as the least number
It's if you've heard.
I've heard. Up to 20. I think the highest was 20
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well,
loved it.
How did each one of those areas differ? Were you doing different things?
Well, for sure, Tahlequah. I mean, it was totally different. You had trees, you had little patches of cropland and a lot of grass. And then Pawnee, you're getting into more cropland, less trees, but still a lot of rolling land and still a lot of grass. Then you get out to Geary, and you've actually, there's more rolling land out at Geary, especially on the west side, than there is here, around here. So you had a lot of cropland. You moved from trees and little patches of cropland to cropland was the main thing. And then when I came here, Canadian County is big time cropland. And in fact, we did a lot of work with terraces, building terraces and waterways and grade stabilization structures. And and we were a very productive office for a long time as far as those kind of items, conservation practices.
Was the size of each office a little different or roughly the same?
Well, roughly. Well, when I first moved here, I had the east. Actually, El Reno was the smallest because I had East Canadian County and part of Kingfisher County, and so it had. Now, when they put it back on the county lines, then it became pretty much like the others as far as size.
Did you aspire to go any further than this, like to be an area?
Well, I thought about it, and with kids, I didn't want them to have to move, and then I just love working with farmers, and so you move out of that position and you work less with farmers.
More paper.
And yeah, and now moving to Stillwater would have been okay. I mean, I love Stillwater, but so I just decided to stick with what I was doing.
Is Canadian County mostly wheat?
Mostly wheat.
Mostly wheat.
There's it's kind of like where I grew up, really. Wheat, milo, alfalfa. There's some cotton grown here, which I wasn't ever around cotton. Soybeans, So, yeah, pretty much what I grew up with.
Okay. So, and in the 80, from 80 to 2010, that's 30 years, what were some changes or some projects? Let's go back, some projects going on here.
Well,
During that time period.
And when Elsa was here, they built 15, now this includes our part of Kingfisher County, which is back to that unusual business. But they built 15 watershed sites in East Canadian County. And so, and one of the sites is Lake El Reno, which is right out west of town. El Reno was flooding, and so they built a flood control dam. Now there's a golf course, part of a golf course around it. They actually bought land for recreation along with the watershed site. So that was that was a major thing. The Great Plains Conservation was a big thing that we were deeply into, and had a lot of contracts, a lot of conservation put on the ground because of that. And highly erodible land became an issue, and we dealt with that. We didn't have a huge amount of highly erodible land, but we had some, and so we treated that. It was high priority, and we did a lot of work around Piedmont back in the, well, before I retired, back in probably the 90s and 2000, building terraces and waterways and grade stabilization structures. And we had several watershed sites there around Piedmont.
I'm not sure where that is.
Well, it's straight north of Yukon.
Okay.
About 20 miles.
And primarily wheat?
Primarily wheat.
Primarily wheat. The golf course, was that before you came on board?
No.
Or during your time?
There was a golf course right next to the recreational land that they'd set up for Site 1, 4 Mile Creek, what it was called. And they decided it was a 9-hole course, so they decided to make it an 18-hole course. So they talked to us about, what do you think about us putting, we'll have some where we are and then come back and finish out on the watershed land. I said, the Conservation District totally agreed. We agreed, NRCS agreed, so they constructed it. It's a great golf course.
So you got to do a little golf course work.
Yeah, that's right. Not really managed, but yeah. It was, and there's not the water capacity in Lake El Reno is not great because it's not that deep, but a lot of recreation happens out there, boats and it's kind of I was a water skier as a kid, and there's not a lot of room out there for water skiing, but that does happen. And there's a swimming area, and there's a running area. In fact, they have a run that starts at the high school football stadium and runs part of the routes on the lake property.
Okay. Is that the town's reservoir?
No, they don't get water out of it. There's plenty of well water around here. So.
Well, any contentious moments?
Well, not really.
No?
We had, one of the things that I was proud of that we accomplished was the team that we had here in office. And we had a lot of student trainees come and go. but the technicians, and we didn't look at a project as that's your responsibility. That's our responsibility. How are we gonna get it done? Like, I mean, you don't send one guy out to stake 10,000 feet of terraces. We hooked up and we'd go out and stake those terraces. And pretty unusual for a district conservationist to be staking terraces, but I loved it and we did it and it worked great. And the teamwork that we had was just, if somebody was really good at something, they did it. I mean, that doesn't mean they didn't have help, but so it just worked great. I was really proud of our team.
How had you learned that approach?
Well, I don't know. I think it just kind of came along. You're constantly trying to figure out how to make things work better, and that's I think it was just a learning process. And you hear about teams. I hadn't really thought of a team as much hearing about a football team, even though I was on one. But at work, what about? And it worked. It just worked great.
I just wondered if you had seen it in action at one of the other places you had worked.
Well, not as much as we had because there wasn't as well. Now at Gary, yes, but in the other offices where I trained, there weren't that many. I mean, we worked as a team, but it wasn't as big a deal as some of the projects we got into here. But it was great.
Well, if you had questions about that sort of thing, did you have a go-to person?
Well, I had great area conservationists that I could go to, and you know what? I don't know anybody that I didn't learn something from, no matter what position they were in. You just learn how to accomplish things from different people, and it was just, there's so many good people that I worked with. Robert Dukes was, I talked about Hubert Choate. After he retired, Robert Dukes came in, and then Nick Owen is the technician now after Robert moved back over to Oklahoma. He lived in Oklahoma City, so he moved back over when that job came open. And a lot of Larry, that's a soil conservationist there and been there for a long time. He's a great guy too, and so we just made it happen. It is, and the conservation districts, I just loved working with them, even though I was making 3 conservation district meetings every month, which was great. I mean,
You have to keep those lines of communication open.
Yep. And
I think Larry had said that Nick won a state award or something.
yes, he did.
For something.
He did, and I don't remember what it was called, but he's a.
And while he was working in this area.
Yes,
in this
yes.
area.
He's never worked anywhere but Reno.
Well, in your time in the service, in the conservation service, women came on board.
Yes.
Do you remember any when that changes were coming along on the pipe?
Well, not it wasn't that big a deal to me. I thought they deserved, and now women being in district conservationist jobs and area conservationist jobs, it just seemed to fit right in. Of course, I didn't ever have a female area conservationist until I was almost to retire, and it just worked fine.
I mean, they had to get the degrees and all that first, so
Right.
there may not have been many in your class even in the 60s and 70s.
Well, I don't know any anybody that was hired, and they hired probably 10 or 15 of us when they hired me. And I don't think there was any girls in that.
That even applied, probably.
Well, maybe not.
And that's part of the,
Yeah.
you can't hire them if they're not applying.
Right, exactly.
Type deal too. What about other minorities?
Well, Robert Dukes is a black man, and we're like this. And I loved him. Dwight Guy, it was a soil conservationist that was here. Excuse me. That was here the same time Robert was. Just one of the guys. I mean, that's the way I looked at it. We were all, and it's all about the way that everyone interacts, and they were perfect at it. And a lot of farmers. I mean, I didn't ever hear one word about it from any farmer other than compliments.
That speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
I'm thinking, okay, from Tahlequah to Pawnee to here, there's Native Americans as well in the. Did you have to work with tribes and things along the way?
Yes, we have the Cheyenne Arapaho tribe that's right out here north of town, Concho, and we built terraces, we built waterways, we worked on grass planting with them, and went great. They have I don't know how many acres of land they've got a pretty good chunk of land out there that's theirs. That's a tribal land, and just work with them just like we did everyone else, and it just went great. It just, again, it's all about people's attitudes.
And how you approach things.
That's right.
Attitude reflects leadership. Is that what they say?
Yeah, that's right.
Something like that.
And it just, in fact, they had a school out there. Now I don't know if the school's, I don't think the school's still going, but it was just, and the National Land Judging Contest that happens every year nationwide. People from all over the nation come, and it's almost always in Canadian County. Bartolina, which you met, we work this thing together, and so Concho has been the site of the National Land Judging Contest many times.
Yeah, I've heard it. Understand it's a secret usually.
Well, it is.
The site from
It
year
is.
to year is.
And they've been to Canadian County so many times that they've started branching out to other counties. But
So getting youngsters interested in it early. Getting youngsters interested in.
Yeah, I mean,
issues.
you've got to be a state winner to be able to be in a national contest. But we put on local land judging contests several times, or helped with that.
And how would you have learned? Well, I mean, going back to agronomy, I guess that you get some education from that you can carry over, but some of the other you'd have to learn.
You learn. Oh, I mean, I learned so much when I went to work for the Soil Conservation Service, because I did judge land in high school. Okay. I was in land judging, and I don't know how good I did at it, but I was and liked it, and so I had some experience with that. But there's so much other that I learned. Terrace, how do you design a layout of a field of terraces and waterways, and then grade stabilization structures to drop the waterway into the creek.
Well, but how would you learn it though? From hands-on, or would you have to read stuff, or what?
No, hands-on.
Hands-on?
Hands-on.
From someone that knew how to do it?
Yes, someone that had that experience. And it was a great learning experience and a great experience all the way around.
Have any frightening moment? Any frightening moments?
Well,
Scary moments?
I don't, not really.
No rattlesnake got you cornered?
No. You made me think, I love to hike, and I have 4 grandsons, and we love to go to the Wichita Mountains down by Lawton, and you made me think of we were hiked up. It was pretty cool. It was not that long ago, but a couple months ago. We hiked up to the top of a rock, and here was a little rattlesnake in a hole, just curled up in a hole. And young, didn't do anything, but it's lucky that we even saw him. But no, I can't think of anything that, and there probably was something, but I just don't remember what it was. But,
Well, did you have to go to the Capitol to make your case on anything or support whatever legislation or whatever? I know you can't lobby, so
no,
put anything
I
along
didn't.
those lines
There were people in positions to
to do
do
that.
that above me, or so no.
What about working with the Conservation Commission?
Well, we did that. Part of the land judging is the Oklahoma Conservation Commission's involved, and and we had some dealings with the Conservation Commission on certain items, and the Watershed Projects were always part of what they supported, and we, like I say, these sites were all built before I got here, but we had the job of inspecting them every year and making sure that they were on private land other than Lake El Reno, but they were on private land, and so making sure that the farmer wasn't doing something that would cause problems with the watershed site. And most, really, in Canadian County, they all worked well. Now, 4 Mile Creek, the Lake El Reno, there's about, I don't know how many miles of channel below the lake that goes through the city of El Reno. And so you've got to keep trees from growing in that. And so that was a challenge, and still is. That's always going to be a challenge. But we had several sites over by Piedmont, Cottonwood Creek, which the overflow out of those sites go into Guthrie. Cottonwood Creek goes into part of Guthrie, the west side of Guthrie, which was flooding. And Uncle John's Creek, which is pretty much straight north of El Reno, goes into Kingfisher, and Kingfisher was flooding. And so, I mean, I don't know how many sites have actually gone around the spillway. So they've not many. So they've really done
their job.
They have.
And we haven't had 100-year rain.
Or a 500.
I guess it's getting close to time that they're rehabilitated. Is it 50 years
Yes,
for some of them?
yes. And some of these are getting, I mean, I came here in '80, so some of these were probably built in the '70s for sure, in the '60s, I would think. I don't remember those dates. It's all on the records, but yeah, they're getting close to that age.
And then while you were here, computers came along.
Yes, not my favorite thing. I never took typing in high school because I was concentrating on science and math. And so all of a sudden you get computers and you're supposed to be your own secretary. And I would never, and I don't mess with computers now, My secretary does, Jan. So, no, I was never a fan of computers. I do like what they can accomplish. I just don't like to be the one that accomplishes it.
Well, then what would you consider the tools of your trade when you were, hard and heavy into all this? What would
Well, we had a lot of design manuals that we worked out of, and hands-on. I mean, you get out, and I counted on the technicians to do most of this, but getting out there and seeing the lay of the land and how this grade stabilization structure will fit in best, and where, how far down do you go, how far up do you go, and it's a lot of it was just hands-on experience.
What would you have to survey or
Yes.
map it out or
Yes.
something?
You had a survey, you had survey equipment, you couldn't function without survey equipment. Laying out terraces, laying out waterways, grade structures, ponds, you couldn't do it without survey.
Did you learn how to do some of that?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
You could do it if you had to.
yes. And I liked it, and liked doing that. And,
That
So-
technology's changed a lot too, I guess.
well, back when I first started, you had one guy looking through the survey, and one guy out there with a rod, checking this elevation compared to that. Now, you don't have a guy looking through this, that it's set on the level and it spins around and sends a signal out, and you've got a target that picks up that signal on your rod. So one guy can do what it took two to do back when I started. So that's major, and there's probably way more things that are going on in engineering that I don't even know about. I've been gone for almost 10 years, so.
Well, that decreases the staff size, I guess, is more of that.
Oh, it does, and I hear, staff is getting down to, well, this office's Nick is handling 6 counties now.
Wow.
I don't know how there's enough hours in the day to do it. This is just my personal feelings, but I don't know how we can do the things we used to do when you had a county now with 6.
Well, it's the things that need doing changed. I mean, is it?
Well, it's not, I don't, of course, over time, the amount of conservation on the land improves because you've built terraces for 50 years or more, 70 years, and you built waterways, but there's, so that has changed, but there's still a lot of conservation needs, working with farmers to encourage them to maintain their terraces and their waterways, and then some things have to be rebuilt. And so, but I think the focus of NRCS has changed somewhat due to the staffing limits, and I'm sure you've heard this from others. And
But it's also expanded too with wildlife and
yes,
all, endangered species.
exactly.
And those sorts of
And
things.
well, since I've been working, or when I worked, we always considered wildlife and habitat as part of the plan. We'd go out and meet with a farmer and go taking into consideration all the land he owned or rented, and write up a conservation plan for all of it. So wildlife was always a part of that. Cattle was always a part of it if he had cattle, and planting grass. Some of the cropland needed to be planted to grass, and this field needed to be terraced, and pond needed in this pasture for the cattle, and so it's always been considered. But there, like you say, there's Endangered Species Act, and some of that's has changed.
Did any of that impact your area?
Well, I don't,
A lesser prairie chicken comes to mind, but I don't
Yeah.
know if Canadian.
Yeah,
Canadian county had any of that.
we would already, we would always consider the habitat more than the actual wildlife.
Well, then you have the wind turbines and.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that sort of thing has changed the landscape.
Yes, it has. We've got a bunch of them right north of town.
Would the office have anything to do with?
Well,
Some of that.
sometimes the construction of a wind turbine might mess up a terrace. It might be setting on where a terrace used to be. So you have to work around that, and then the roads into each one of those turbines has to be considered. And so, yeah, there was things that had to be changed because of that wind turbine going in.
Some negotiation going on?
Well, and I think they're pretty dead set on where they want them, where they want to put them, but sometimes there could be a little movement because it just worked better for the conservation system that's in place. So, yeah.
But the landowner would have to renegotiate
Yeah.
their plan if
Yeah,
they did
and-
something like that.
Flood control dams too. You sure can't have one in the emergency spillway or on where the dam is. But yeah, that could be an issue too.
So before they put one in, would they check with the?
Well, not really. Now the farmer might. He might come in and say, hey, they're gonna put a wind turbine in. What am I gonna have to do with my terrace to make it work right? So yeah, that wasn't a huge issue when I was working, but it sure could be.
Did you do any prescribed burns when you were?
Well, we did have plans for prescribed burns.
Was
Yes.
that a hard sell?
No,
Oh.
not really. Once you tell them the benefits, and a lot of farmers are pretty well educated now, and ranchers, they know the benefits, and so it wasn't a hard thing for us to sell.
Any natural disasters occurred during your 30-some years here?
Well, you know what? Earthquakes and flood control dams
Wow.
can be an issue, but I can't think of any. Of course, county roads and flood control dams, trying to get a water. Here's a 100-foot wide spillway. Go across a road. That's major. You can't build a road up and block the spillway, so you've got to work with county commissioners to accomplish that. And earthquakes could really be an issue. And, here an earthquake happens and you've got a flood control dam and it puts a crack and maybe lose a dam. And I don't know that that's happened, but that sure could be.
So typically, if an earthquake happens, someone from the agency goes out and checks those
Yes.
all those
Yes.
within a certain
Yeah.
time frame, I guess.
Yes. That's part of the
Day-to-day stuff.
local office responsibility to make sure and they call the engineer that needs to be called.
So on a typical day for you, what would that entail?
Well, depending on what time of the year it was, and what was going on with as far as writing contracts with farmers, like the Great Plains contract, or
What decade, I guess?
yes, exactly. So you might have that going on all day. You might have a conservation district meeting that you have to go to. You might be I may be going with Nick to help him accomplish something that he has going that he needs help with. physical help. And so staff meetings, we always had a staff meeting once a week, and so it varied a lot. Meeting with farmers on conservation plans, meeting with the farmer to, and another thing that I haven't talked about is the Farm Services Agency would take applications for terraces and waterways and those kind of things, also with payment. We had the Great Plains contract. I mean, they don't exist anymore, but they would also have the annual conservation practices that we would get those applications in, and then we'd go meet with the farmer to see what it is that he wanted to accomplish and work with him in that area. So it varied day to day, but it was always a challenge, and I can't remember a boring day.
You probably didn't have 5 minutes that, oh, what am I going to do now?
Yeah, you didn't have very much of that. No.
Was it an 8 to 5?
Well, you know what? It was 8 to 5 back when I started, but then it became I don't remember what the name of it was, but you could work 9-hour days and get 1 day a pay period off, like a Friday. So we all went to that.
Kind of like flex time, something
Yeah,
similar to
yeah, that's
flex
what
time.
it is. Yeah, and I like that. That gave you a 3-day weekend every other week to do something with the wife and the grandkids and the kids.
Yeah.
We live on the west side of town, and our son lives as a crow flies, and you can't drive there this easy. 1 block away, and our daughter lives about 3 blocks away. And son has 2 young grandsons, or sons, grandsons for us. So I cook oatmeal for them 3 days a week, and they come over, I take them to school, I pick them up. And then our daughter she's the younger of the 2, but she has the older boys. One of them is going to be 18 this spring, and the other one is 13. And the younger one plays basketball, and the older one is a runner, and he's going to play soccer this year. So I'm so blessed. How could you ask for a better deal than that?
Is the 18-year-old going to head to OSU?
Well, I think he's going the other way. His older half brother went to OU, and it's a long story. But
That's okay.
He's
going somewhere. That's
we keep
the main
encouraging him to at OSU, taking the few games, and so it'll be all right.
Well, were your kids in FFA or 4-H?
Son was, and he had his pigs in a FFA lot that they had that you could raise your pigs if you weren't on a farm, and so he did that. He was a soccer player, and daughter was I was just going through pictures just the other day, taking them out of an album and putting them in a file box, and her first dance recital when she was a little girl, and she works for the health department, and Greg works for the Department of Environmental Quality at the state. So he's in the air quality.
Did either one of those go to OSU? Did either one of the kids?
They both did.
Okay.
For a very temporary time, maybe 1 year apiece.
Yeah.
Then Jenna graduated from UCO, and Greg did too.
A little closer to home.
Yeah, yeah. But Greg, I gotta tell you this real quick. He goes to Crested Butte to become a lift operator. So we go visit him at Crested Butte, Colorado. Then he moves to Bellingham, Washington, which is north of Seattle. So we go there to visit. Then some kids from El Reno, their dad was going to retire from being an optometrist in Hawaii. So they built a house so his kids went and lived in the house and said, Greg, you might have come over, Maui, you ought to come here and live with us. So he did. So we went there. And then he comes back to El Reno and I said, Greg, what about Australia? I want to come visit you. So, but it's good to have him back.
Did they understand what your work was?
Yeah, I mean, sort of from the outside looking in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I think most people have at least when I was working, had a very high regard for NRCS.
They understood what you did?
And what we accomplished.
What you accomplished.
And what we did with farmers. I mean, we couldn't accomplish anything without our cooperation with the farmer and the conservation district. So it was very rewarding job. And when I retired, I'm going, for 3 years, I'm going, why did I retire? I just missed it so much. I missed the people. I missed the people I worked with, the farmers, the people that gave us assistance from the area office and the state office. And now, the oldest grandson, which is going to be 18, for about the last 3 years, we've had a mowing business with push mowers. You know the John Deere commercial, and it's not
how fast you mow, but
how well you mow fast.
Yeah.
I introduced him as well and fast. He's about 5'11", and he's a runner, and he can push a lawnmower. And his little brother is going to be involved. He's involved somewhat, but he's going to be involved a lot more next summer.
I mean, that's stretching the turf grass concept a little bit.
Yes,
but
that's right. We are going there. Yeah.
Well, what made you decide to retire?
Well, I don't know. It just seemed like the right time to do it, and others.
Age-wise or time of service? I mean.
Well.
Years, yeah.
I don't. Time of service and age, but I was 60 or almost 60, and I'm going. After I did it, I'm going. That wasn't an issue. But we go back to the computer,
Mm-hmm.
and Larry Hood, which I mentioned, Larry. He was here, but he kept applying for other jobs, and I thought, good night, if Larry leaves, I won't know what to do with that computer. So that had something to do with it, and he's still there. I could have still been there.
Do you remember your last week or day on the job?
Well, it was around Christmas time, so there was a lot of leave being taken, you know. And not really. I mean,
Did it make one last trip out somewhere?
Well, I thought about that many times when I was in the last few weeks, and so there were a lot of trips around different places, and there's so many places that I went working that I haven't been back since. That's another. I mean, around the county. Mm-hmm. And that's another hard thing that you don't just go driving around the county. But you could, I guess.
But as you're going somewhere, you think, oh, I had something to do with that.
Yes,
or
exactly.
we did this, or.
Yes.
So they really need to do that now.
Yeah, Manning Road, which you go by, just before you get here. Banner Road, which my, the older grandson and his brother, both it's through the 8th grade. But Manning Road is named after a couple of farmers that we worked with. That's just an example. So, yeah.
About how many Great Plains plans would you have? Any idea?
We had a bunch. I don't have any.
I mean, a couple hundred or more than that? I mean, I
Well,
don't know what would be in
probably
the county.
not. I was trying to remember how many, you were funded, the county was funded a certain amount of money, and you would take that money as far as it would go as with contracts. But so the bigger the contract, or the fewer you had. So I don't really have a
Is some
feel for it.
competition that are competitive a little bit?
Yeah,
competitive?
well, it was about which was needed the most.
Which was needed.
Which one had the most conservation problems that needed to be taken care of? So
Did anyone ever come in that wanted help and you couldn't help
Oh,
them?
yeah.
Couldn't help them?
yeah, well, financially.
Right.
Now, we could help if they were willing to do it on their own, but yeah, there were several that applied, and I'd say just apply again next year. Maybe we can do it then.
Were there more men producers than women?
Yes.
Or were they probably weren't very many
No.
women that would come in?
No. Well, and a lot of women owners, because of their husband had died, but then they had it rented out to someone.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but we had a few. In fact, we have 2 women on our conservation district board right now, and there was one when I was working here in Reno, and great. I didn't work with these 2 that they have now because I'd already retired. But the lady that was on the board, I mean, we worked hand in hand. Yeah, great lady.
Well, does anyone call you for advice now? Or an opinion?
Well, I haven't had much of that. I wouldn't say it hadn't happened at all, but I haven't had much of that.
Well,
Because they're the people that are in the office are sound. I
quite
mean,
confident.
yes.
Well, when you first got here, if you needed help or an opinion or advice, who would you turn to?
Well, when I was in Gary, I would turn to Elsa. And when I got here, depending on, well, if it was something that engineering that our technician could help me with, or if it was something that I needed help from we had good area conservationists that I could get help from, or wildlife. We had wildlife conservationists that I could get help from. So there was a variety of people that I could call on.
Had a network.
Yes.
Did you have a
And we even had computer people that I could call.
Do you consider anyone a mentor?
Well, I would have to say that when the 4.5 years I was out at Gary, when you say that, Elsa Bullen comes to mind.
Is that LC?
Elsa, Elza. He's gone. So another thing that I didn't talk about was Wheatland RC&D, which is out of Enid, and Carl Smith would come around, and we would come up with projects for cities, like the city of El Reno. The school system put in a running track at a grade school, and got funded by Wheatland RC&D. Then Elsa, you made me think when we were talking about Elsa, a city park, over fairly close to where I live. They put a concrete track around. It's about 4/10 of a mile. And then we build a bridge. There's a creek runs through that park. And we built a bridge over that. So, and Elsa was in the middle of that all the way. And so I would have to say that, of course, when I was being trained, Bill Dudley and at Tahlequah, I mean, and the technician, and same way in Pawnee. I learned a lot from all of them, the DCs and the technicians. And when I got out to Gary, Daryl Putman had only been working for a year, but he had that experience around Gary that helped me too. So it was just a lot of people.
And you mentioned urban and rural. Were there any conflicts between balancing that out between urban and rural?
Well, not really. I mean, a lot of good cropland has been taken up by housing developments.
Everywhere, yes.
And that's I always thought there ought to be some kind of a way to take the more marginal land and save all the cropland for future food. But that's harder to develop also. So,
How about any archaeological issues? No,
you know what the
fossils and such, dinosaur bones, that sort of thing.
yeah no
Not for this county.
The Chisholm Trail goes through Canadian County, and there's not much. You know, if you didn't see a sign on the road, you wouldn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
But so because there's not any preservation of that, but that's the first thing that came to mind when you said that.
I was thinking Native American sites.
Yeah, and there might have been issues out there that we that they took care of before we got there. Yeah, it was a pleasure working with those guys, and it wasn't. The tribe had a certain person that handled that conservation work, and so we worked with them. And if there was an issue, then he would go take it to the leaders. And
Okay. Yeah, and I guess the other piece of that was the district itself, the conservation district itself would have
yes,
their fingers in things.
and what a wise move on the part of the original people to set up conservation districts with local people, local farmers that knew the issues in that county. And so that was a teamwork too. I mean, we'd tell them what we were trying to accomplish, and so we'd work back and forth, and love that too. And the watershed sites, I mean, they
Getting easements, not always easy.
exactly.
Yeah.
It is. I admire Elsa for all. I mean, 15 watershed sites that you had to get all these easements. I don't know how there was enough time in the day to do it on top of everything else that was going on. So I didn't experience that, but I did. One site wasn't built, and it's still not built. And I did work a little bit in that area trying to. We were going to move a watershed site from down along a creek up to and build the county where the county road was, and put the road over the. And we do have. Yeah, there are some sites that are like that. We don't really have one that the road runs down the dam, but we're going to try to accomplish that. And talk about a lot of detailed work that took a lot of time, and we didn't. we didn't get there. We couldn't get all the easements, so.
I think the I-40 came through, but that would have been before your time too.
Yeah.
Some of that's in Canadian County, isn't it? Some of
Oh, yeah.
Some of I-40.
Yes, a big chunk of it. From Oklahoma City, that's all, on this side of Oklahoma City, all the way out to almost Hinton is
It's Canadian.
through Canadian County.
So Elsa would have had to deal with some of that probably
Probably.
during his
Probably.
times.
Of course, it wouldn't have been near as, he wouldn't have been working on easements like he would on Watershed side, but yeah, for sure.
How big is Canadian County?
Oh,
Well, I mean, do you know how many's in big cropland? I guess that sort of any of
No.
that number you might have.
I could have told you how many acres was in a Canadian county.
Back in
Yeah.
2010.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
but I don't remember what it is
That's
now.
fair enough.
It is a pretty good size county, and it's the South Canadian River is the boundary of part of it, and the North Canadian River runs right through it, which
Well, that's flooded issues all the way around.
yes, yes, and the Oklahoma County wanted to change the North Canadian River to Oklahoma River. Well, which I'm not sure they didn't, but it's North Canadian still here. And the South Canadian is just called the Canadian part of the time too. I guess people thought this water was coming out of Canada.
Oh, did it come
When
up
they,
then?
way back, when they first named these rivers. Well, that's what I've heard. It makes sense with the name, but I don't know if it makes,
Yeah, I don't
I don't know if it's true.
Well, some of the names of the streams or creeks that you cross over, like Cowbell or
Buggy, there's a Buggy Creek that we cross all the time going down to Wichita Mountains.
well, in this county, you would have to know where they all are. Would you?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
you familiar enough
Well,
with,
yeah, and
with that
And
sort of thing?
you work with maps all the time, aerial photographs,
Okay.
and maps also, but and then landowner maps. That here's this big map that would be on the wall, and each quarter of a section would tell, or however big it was, would tell a name. It would have a name of who we had a conservation plan with. Not necessarily the owner. I'm looking at the clock. We got plenty of time. So you worked with all those maps. And aerial photography is just, I mean,
Well, that's changed a lot too in
yeah,
the 30 years you were
yes,
in it.
yeah. But you could, and our conservation maps were made from those aerial maps.
So you'd still need a mental image of the whole
You
your whole
do.
area you're responsible for.
Exactly. How far east of Piedmont do I go before I get to the county line? How far north? How far south of Mustang? Piedmont, Yukon, and Mustang are all in Canadian County. And that's a lot of people. And it's taking up a lot of land.
Well, and what if the producer's land crossed the county? You just have to work with the conservation
Yes.
person in that.
Yeah, well, and
jointly.
that is a good question, because you might have a contract with a guy and he said, well, part of my land's over in Oklahoma County. Well, you just work with that county and put it in your contract.
And who has the final say? Whichever one has the
Well-
most of the land?
Probably,
Probably.
yeah.
If it came to that.
Yeah, exactly. And that wasn't ever a problem. Now, here's a guy in Kingfisher County working with East Canadian County Conservation District. That became a little of an issue, because here's the county line, and I was telling Larry, I was working with Steve Winters, who worked for the district in Kingfisher County, and we were trying to figure out where to put, you've seen these signs, leaving East Canadian County Conservation District, entering Kingfisher County.
Mhm.
We were almost to Kingfisher where we drove this line in the ground, or where we decided it was going to be. So that's a little strange too. But it was all, it brought us together. It brought Kingfisher and Canadian County together. So it all worked well.
Would you all get together on a regular basis, all the other DCs?
Well, yeah.
Or at least
Yeah.
about in the area anyway?
Yes, we'd have area meetings, whoever was in your area. We'd have a meeting at a central location, and those were always good.
Any special memories from anything you want to tell on anybody?
Not really. I mean, it was always during work hours, and so there weren't. Now, sometimes the land judging, the national land judging contest, the awards banquet would happen in Oklahoma City at the Cowboy Hall of Fame, and so that was always a neat. If you have never been in that room, it's an amazing room, and so you would have all of the students there and all the people that helped with the contest, and so that was neat.
From around the country, yeah.
Yeah,
Nation.
Hawaii. It's always amazing to me that Hawaii sent a group of kids to Canadian County. Yeah, to Oklahoma City actually. They come out here, and so that was pretty neat.
And we're looking at the bigger picture too, historically. What is Oklahoma known for within the conservation?
Well, I would say the Dust Bowl.
Mhm.
And that's when all this started, was due to the Dust Bowl. There was a storm that came in from the west and blew dust all the way to Washington, D.C. from the Dust Bowl. And that's when the lights came on, and Hugh Hammond Bennett stepped up and said, we need to do something about this. And that's where conservation started, or soil conservation started.
Well, at the time when you left, was it known for anything else? I mean, would people turn to Oklahoma and say, this is a good example
Well,
of X?
I think the Watershed Program was one of we probably are one of the states with the most watersheds dams, the flood control dams. I don't know how that all ties together, but we had a lot, and then I mean, if they look at the conservation that's been put on the ground, even I need to, and I think I did say this, but in Canadian County, we were one of the leaders as far as getting conservation on the land back in the 90s and early 2000s. Nick and I were talking about this interview, and he said he brought that up, and we were.
How did you accomplish that? Do you know, how did that come to be?
Well, we had a lot of contracts that we and a lot of need, like around Piedmont. I was telling you that, and then scattered around everywhere. We had a field of very good cropland that needed terraces.
Well, how would they learn about
No,
what you could do for them, or about particular programs? How would they learn?
I think a lot of the learning was done by observing what the neighbor did,
Yeah.
and and we put articles in the paper,
Okay.
but I think, you know, I'm out there farming and I've got erosion going on and I'm looking over there and he's got terraces and I'm going, I need some of those. You know, I think that's the way a lot of that happens.
I would think some educational programs, I don't know, did you do some of those along the way to like community programs or in the schools or something?
Not a
really?
lot. I mean, there was some of that went on, but we didn't do a lot of that. We didn't.
Well, by the time you came, some of that was just already known, I guess.
Right.
Too.
It pretty well was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just keep up the good work, and people keep coming back.
That's right. That's right. Keep applying, and the word's out that. Well, and think about this. If I'm going to get 70% of the cost of putting in a terrace system paid for by the government, why, I'd be crazy not to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And now a pond would only be 50%, but even that, you know, I'm going to get a pond for my cattle, for livestock water, and the government's going to pay for half of it. So that gets out there too, and that's why FSA, the Farm Service Agency, gets a lot of applications. We got a lot of applications for our contracts, and it just works. It all ties together and it works.
Any other big projects you can think of during your 30 years? Now I know Equip.
Oh yeah, Equip contracts. We're a lot like Great Plains contracts. Same idea.
Same concept.
Yeah.
Similar anyway.
Yes.
And you did I don't guess this county had to worry about ramp, rural, the abandoned mine. Probably not in Canadian.
Not much.
I wouldn't think. Do you have an opinion about whether appointed or career for the chief?
Well, I just heard about the new chief. Did you? Have you heard about it?
Mm-hmm.
He's from like Virginia, and he's had a lot. He grew up on a farm. So
That's a plus.
when you depending on what his background was,
Yeah.
it could be very good. But depending on if his background was, and he doesn't know anything about conservation, then I see how that could be a problem. But anybody can learn if they don't already know.
Well, they need to learn to listen, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That's right.
People
Yeah,
who
but
do know.
this guy that's stepping up now seems like a good candidate.
You were probably when that change came about. You were probably just young into it.
Yeah.
What about when they changed the name from SCS to NRCS?
Well, you know what? I kind of liked it. Because we're way more than just soil.
And just soil. Yeah.
So I thought it was a good change. I mean, it was, you know, it caused a few challenges, but as far as changing all the paperwork and everything else, but I thought it was a good change.
Well, when you first started, was the trucks, or people could just tell coming down the street that was a SCS, put same markings and all that? I guess.
And now they painted them on then. Now they have those little magnetic things that fit on the door. But I mean, when I was working, now I don't know what's happening now. Whether they have, I think they still do.
I don't know.
I think they still do.
So if they're magnetic, you could just switch it from car to car.
Right, well, you could, or you could, if you got enough, you could just put them on this pickup, and this pickup.
Company pickup, or was it your own?
No, it was a government.
Government.
Had a U.S. government tag on it, and yeah.
Well, if you met someone outside of Oklahoma or outside of Canadian county and they asked you what you did, would they understand what you meant? Or would you have to explain?
Well, depending on what their background was, if they were
A farmer, then they would.
yeah, if they would know. Now, if they were a city person, I'd probably have to explain what we did.
Explain, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I shouldn't say a city. If they just didn't have a idea about conservation, yeah, then you would have to explain. But I think a lot of people would understand.
I didn't have I mean, I hadn't had any reason to
Well, yeah.
think, so I would have to ask.
And when hey, here I grew up on a farm, and when I'm going, and I'd meet these guys in class and that were student trainees back at OSU, and I said, well, what do you do? I grew up on a farm, and I didn't, because I just hadn't had any dealings with the soil conservation. So.
Well, anywhere along the way, did you think about getting out of it? Or would you make your career choice and?
Well, real early on, you're constantly trying to figure out what am I going to do for the rest of my life, and because so you have a few questions then, but after I was in probably 3 years, that was done. I knew, and it was a good thing because you had time to spend with your kids. I became my son's soccer coach. I didn't even know how many. I'd never seen a soccer game before. I said, "Now, how many points do you make when the ball goes through the goal?" And so it gives you time for that too, because you're gone all the time and working all the time, and so that was a good thing.
Family oriented.
I feel very blessed to have done what I did. And
Well, I mean, it seems family friendly from inside and out.
yes.
That you keep in touch with people that were
Oh yeah.
across the state too.
Yes. Yeah. I was thinking about that when I was thinking about this. Hubert, the technician that was here when I came here in '80 and retired, he retired probably 85 or something. And he moved way back east somewhere. And I never saw him again. And he's gone now. And I hate that. I mean,
Had he been appointed or told to come here? I mean, he had made the moves within the agency and ended up here. Do you know?
well, you know what? He started here, and I don't think he was ever anywhere else. He was a conservation technician, and I don't know that for sure, but I don't think he was.
They could choose to stay or just like the
Yes,
did up to.
it did. As long as he didn't apply for, and there wasn't any problems with his work. Yeah. Good man. You know what? I can't think of very many people that work for the Soil Conservation Service or NRCS that weren't good people.
Well, I mean, I guess if they weren't, they didn't stay around. They didn't stay.
That's probably right.
Yeah. Or either by choice or by
Right.
higher design, whatever.
Yeah. Now, some people didn't always make the decision that made everybody happy, but that's like placing someone here rather than someone else at a certain position. But that's just part of the deal. I didn't ever think of that as anything other than that's a decision they had to make, and they made it.
So over your 38 years, no regrets
No.
work-wise or?
No. I just, Jan and I are still like this, and the kids are here, and the grandkids, and what a blessing grandkids are. I can remember when Drake, that's the oldest one, I thought, you feel that when your kids are born, but it's a whole different feeling when a grandkid's born. It's almost like, how could you beat this?
Well, and get to stay in one place is what I'm thinking too.
Yes.
From other stories I've heard to get to,
Well, now,
to stay here.
Jenna works in several offices around the state. Around this area, as a health department. And Greg drives to Oklahoma City every day, and his wife does too. But still, I mean, and Greg was thinking of moving to Salt Lake City. I'm going, Greg.
Another place to visit.
Yeah, snow skiing. I mean, he's all about. And thank goodness that didn't work out.
And you could trace it back to deciding to go to Tahlequah as your first choice.
Yeah.
Because of river floating or whatever.
Yeah, floating the river. That was a good experience too.
We've covered a lot. Is there anything else you want to add that I don't know to ask about? Is red cedars a problem here?
They are.
Are they?
Yeah.
How about wild hogs?
They are.
They are.
That I don't know how big, but the South Canadian River and probably the North Canadian is a good habitat around those rivers for hogs.
Oh, for hogs.
And and cedars will spread anywhere that you'll see some cedars going back towards Yukon just because it's not a pasture anymore, and they just spread like crazy. It's now even where pastures are, that's part of the issue is trying to
That's the
figure
problem.
out.
Someone needs to figure it out.
Yeah, well, and burning.
Yeah, prescribed burns. Yeah, help.
Yeah. But there's not as big a deal here as there are in a lot of counties, but there are wherever one cedar gets going. If you are on top of it, they'll spread.
Are there any back on your family farm in
Lamont,
Lamont?
there aren't. I don't know how big a deal cedars are up there. I know.
Well, somebody's paid attention and
Yeah,
hit them before they get too big.
yeah.
I'm just checking the list real quick. Only the thing that what do you see for the next 10 years for the service?
Well, I've talked to the guys at the office about what's going on the last 10 years, and it's changed so much over the last 10 years. Well, like having an area that a few people are handling, like 6 counties.
Mhm.
I don't know. I just don't. I don't have a good feeling about that. But I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong.
We still need farms
right.
or agriculture.
And there's still conservation to be done.
And there's still floods and all that.
That's right.
Yeah, just more people in different spots, I guess, that are
Right.
causing other issues.
Yeah.
Well, we will see, won't we?
Yes, we will.
Well, then my last question is, how do you want history to remember Duane Crider? Broadly or narrowly, however you want to take it.
Well, as a Christian that cared about the land and the people and loved what I did. I just loved it. And to carry on for that conservation that I had something to do with and the example that others see of the conservation work that was done, for that to carry on.
Okay. Well, let's hope that happens too.
That's right.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
You have been a pleasure. I just love talking to you.
I'm sure you've got lots more stories, but we've got to get you to your grandson.
Yeah, I got to get grandson
Gotta
picked
get
up.
the grandson. Well, thank you.
Thank you.